would show you, I have a new drop in my Etsy shop. If you don't know, I have an Etsy shop. It's Angel Wing Soap because I do lip balms too. But I have now freeze-dried sourdough starter. These are 12-gram packets. And it's enough to get you started. And this video will show you the activation process. Also, when you order from me, there is a detailed instruction printout in there and troubleshooting guides. So if you have issues or whatever, but it's Angel Wings, or sorry, Michelle's Rustics Loaves. But yeah, so this sourdough starter has been around in our family for 14 years now. So it's tried and true. It's been really good to us. But I can show you how I do this process from freeze-dried to reactivating it. But I'll put my link to my Etsy shop below. So if you'd like to grab one of these, if you want to get started on your own journey with sourdough baking. Also, don't forget to name your sourdough starter. Most of us have a name for ours, but let me show you the process on getting this from freeze-dried to the active starter stages to start baking. So this is day one of my freeze-dried sourdough starter. I have about 12 grams of freeze-dried starter here. I've zeroed out my jar on my scale. So I'm going to pour this in and see if it's 12 grams right now. See, we're at 11. Add a little more. And there, now we're at 12. So what I will do is start adding the water to it. So now you're going to want to add 2 tablespoons of filtered water. You don't want tap water because it may hinder the reactivation process because of the chlorine that's in your regular water. So I added that. I'm just going to let that sit for a few minutes to try and soak up the water to where it will start breaking down, and then I will come back and stir it. So I don't know if you can see down in here, but there's still clumps, but they're soft. So you're just going to want to stir this up, and using a fork is best. And I grabbed a quart jar. You could use a pint or a little jelly jar. You don't have to have this big of a jar. But I started with this big because I know when I keep feeding it, I'm going to need this tall of a jar. That way I have leftovers after I'm using it. So, as you can tell, it's pretty much done. It's a couple chunks, and if there's a couple small chunks, you don't got to worry about that. And then on the first day, you're typically not going to see bubbles after it's settled. Sometimes I do the first day, I just see a light bubbling, but it's not a big deal if you don't see the bubbles. So, yeah, so this is day one. Then after you've got most of the lumps mixed up, you're going to put 1 tablespoon of flour in, and then you're going to mix it. And then it's just going to look like a gooey type texture, but then you're just going to let it sit, and that's your first day. So today is day 2 of rehydrating the freeze-dry starter. So this is what it looks like. Let's see if I can get it to focus. So there is a couple bubbles and a slight bit of clear liquid on the top, which is good. You want that. It doesn't have to have that. It's fine if you're on day 2 and it's just nothing there. So I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of flour for day 2, and then 2 teaspoons of warm filtered water, and then I'm going to stir it. I'm using a fork again today, and you're just going to mix it until it's all mixed together and smooth. Usually kind of sticky, a loose sticky. So I like to get it to where the consistency is a little more thinner goop, basically is how to put it. So sometimes I add a couple more drops of water, maybe a quarter teaspoonful more, and just mix it up to where it's not so thick it's in a ball, because I want it to kind of be thinned out, but not too thin. So I'm going to scrape it off the edges, make sure it's mixed good, and lay in flat on the bottom of the jar. And then I'll put the lid back on it, and we will wait for day 3. So this is the end of day 2. I thought I'd show you how it's already starting to bubble and get puffy. It's starting to rise a little bit, so it's starting to already get reactivated. So that's a sign of some really good starter. So it is day 3 of reactivating this freeze-dried starter. So we're trying to get this to focus in. You can tell there is some bubbles in there, and it did rise a little bit. So that's really good for after the 2nd day. So on the 3rd day, I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of flour, and then 2 teaspoons of water. Sometimes I have to add another ½ teaspoon to thin it a little bit, but I will stir this and show you what it looks like. So I'm just stirring it with my fork, and it's just kind of like stretchy, goopy, and it's usually in like a pile there. As long as it's stretchy, that's good to go. And I will just let it sit, because then it'll just even out on the bottom, and then it will rise some, and you will definitely see bubbles today. So we are on day 4 of the Sourdough starter. Again, there was bubbles, and it did rise a little bit. Today we're going to be adding a little bit more bulk. We're going to do a 1/3 cup flour and a 1/4 cup water. So I'm going to add this without trying to dump it everywhere. Actually, I'm going to grab my canning jar lid. That way I don't waste any of it, and I can dump it in. So I got that in there, and then I will put the 1/4 cup of water in there. And then I will just stir it up. So I've got it pretty well stirred. And I took my fork and I scraped around the edges on the inside just to kind of keep it cleaned up some. But the consistency is, again, kind of a more thinner, but it's still thicker. It's kind of hard to describe, but yeah, looks like that. And we will let it sit. This will definitely rise and get bubbles. And we're adding bulk. Let's see. So I will mark my jar today, probably with a marker, where it's even, to see the rise on it, to where I can show you tomorrow. So I thought I'd show you. I used a spatula and kind of pushed down the edges. Got it kind of smoothed out on the bottom there. And then I'm going to I just use a permanent marker. You can use any kind, or a rubber band, and put around this, but you can see this is where it's at. So I'm just going to put a line, if I can get it to go here, just right there, so I kind of know where my starting point is. And then I'll see how much above that it rises. So we'd be able to see, it comes up and then falls again. But yeah, if you mark it, you'll be able to see, and we'll see that tomorrow. So I thought I'd show you, I fed my sourdough it's been about 4 hours, and look how far it has risen up to. That is quite a bit. So this freeze-dried starter I started a few days ago, rehydrating it, is very active, and it's doing its job. So yeah, rehydrating from freeze-dried works really well, and my sourdough starter has been going for 14 years. So yeah, I'll show you what it looks like tomorrow, because it'll start to fall again when it needs to be fed. So as you can see, my sourdough yesterday, this is day 5 now, rose all the way up to here and then fell back down. It's down to about right here now. So it is up a little higher. But yeah, it came all the way up to here. So that's a huge rise. You can now from here on out continue to feed with a 1/3 cup flour and a 1/4 cup water. If you want to bulk it up like I'm going to be using 1 cup flour and a 1/2 cup of water so I can bulk it up. And then I'll feed it that daily. I'll do some discard. The discard I do save in a jar in the fridge, and then when I get enough discard, I make sourdough crackers with it. So nothing ever goes to waste. But so I'm just gonna dump flour in there, my water. This time I'm just using a butter knife, and then I'm gonna start stirring. You see, it's just gonna start mixing in. And you can see when I'm mixing, this is still kind of thick and balled up. So what I'm going to do is add about another 1/4 cup of water to loosen that up. Oops. And once you get used to making this, you will know when it needs more water, more flour. So I'm much happier with this consistency. It's more gooey and thicker, but it's thinned out to where it's not just a ball. So I will let this rise. Obviously it's way up to here, so it's probably going to rise, you know, way up. So eventually I'm going to have to get a bigger jar. This is a sourdough jar I currently use. This is my daily. So it's quite a bit bigger than the quart jar. But this is the one I use all the time. And it fits my needs. I can, like right now, I got 2 sandwich sourdough loaves going, which that recipe calls for a cup of starter. So it works out good for my family. But yeah, that's all you need to do on rehydrating your sourdough starter. You can go to my website. I will link it below. It's over on Etsy. And you can pick up your own rustic loaves, Michelle's Rustic Loaves sourdough starter, and get started on your journey. I thought I would pop on quick and show you. I fed this 4.5 hours ago. This was day 5, and it was about to here. It like rose all the way up. So I'm gonna have to move that to a bigger jar tomorrow, because that just will not have room after I discard and feed some more tomorrow. And I'm getting ready to put my sourdough sandwich bread in the oven now. I would show you, these are how my 2 sourdough loaves turned out. They rose nicely, and mine are the perfect size for actual sandwich bread. They're not big and they're not small. They're the normal size of sandwich bread when you slice them.